Well, we're back now with Helima Croft here in Abu Dhabi. Helima, when you see images like that, there's no doubt about how that's going to play here in the Arab world. What's your take on what happens next with these relationships? Because obviously the Saudi-U.S. relationship has seen so much improvement over the last couple of years. Where do we go from here?
I mean, I think what's going to be very interesting is how these Gulf states sort of thread the needle, because they were very happy, some of these states, with the arrival of Donald Trump. He's done what they have wanted on the Iranian nuclear deal. But this is going to be potentially problematic because while they've had better relations with Israel on security, they have to manage also their populations as they watch this news unfold. So I think it's going to be a delicate diplomatic balancing act for the leaders of the Gulf states.
And what happens next in terms of the markets? Obviously, this won't impact markets immediately. But in terms of this security situation impacting oil markets going forward?
I mean, I think this becomes a generalized sense of instability in the Middle East because, we've had Syria, we've had Yemen, we had the rocket exchange, over Syria with the Iranians and the Israelis last week. So even though it doesn't...
The Iraqi elections as well,
Iraqi
which
elections,
no one seems to be paying attention to,
al-Sadr, which is incredible. I mean, the return of al-Sadr is an amazing development. And so it just leads to this generalized sense of uncertainty. And then you have these sort of pockets of stability like Abu Dhabi. But for a lot of people watching the oil markets, I think they're starting to think about Middle East risk premium again.
Yeah, Helima, I'm glad you brought up that name, Muqtada al-Sadr. We haven't heard that in a while. So we have the prospect of him basically leading Iraq. What does that do to the whole Sunni-Shia power balance? And also, I mean, in terms of producer, Iraq is not negligible.
Iraq is not negligible, and if there's one country that's been a kind of a weak link within OPEC, it has been Iraq. They're the second largest, taking the second largest cut within OPEC. Very hard to get them to the deal because they've insisted they should be exempted like Libya and Nigeria because there's security problems. And so this election was closely watched because potentially who was going to be running that country could have impact on oil policy. I don't think it's going to matter for the next OPEC meeting because it's going to take several months to form that government, but certainly the rise of al-Sadr, I mean, he's an interesting character because he's got very, very difficult relations with the United States, but increasingly difficult relationships with the Iranians as well. And the Iranian government has signaled that they do not want him to form a coalition. And he's recently had a rapprochement with Saudi Arabia. Al-Sadr was there over the summer. So I think it's going to be very important to watch what happens in Iraq. I think it's in a potentially a key proxy battle now over the future of the Middle East. The Iranians do not want to let Iraq go post-nuclear deal exit.
Absolutely not. But at the same time, I mean, we've seen the Saudis working on Iraq for a while now. A couple of years ago in Munich, I'm sitting there with the Saudi foreign minister. I'm later talking to the Iraqi prime minister, Haider al-Abadi, and he's basically telling me, we welcome the Saudis back here. We don't want to be the last ones that, holding the bag for the Iranians. We welcome the Saudi input.
I think that's been an incredible diplomatic feat, what we've seen with Abadi going to Saudi Arabia over the summer, the Iraqi delegations, what the Saudis have promised in terms of new trade relationships, their efforts to stabilize Iraq.
And what happens to those now if we have Muqtada al-Sadr?
I mean, I think with Sadr, it's actually okay because, again, he went to Saudi Arabia. He sat down with the Saudi crown prince. And so I actually think a Sadr-Abadi coalition keeps that intact. I mean, we really want to watch the Iranian-backed candidates. Those are the ones that I think would want to kill that rapprochement.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.